What do you consider as one of the biggest issues you encountered in being Black and blue? Starting with you, Elder.
I'm diving into this because this is broadly about what we were going through and who we were dealing with at the time. But I'm treating it in a very personal way, and I hope this works out. And, you know, I decided to jot, you know, this down because I thought it would be helpful really to all of us. Yeah, you know, and here we go. Within this tight time frame, I pray I offer a glimpse into a place and a time, a Black generation, and this Black Yaley. I entered Yale as a freshman in 1966. My graduating class of 1970 was the last all-male class in the 269-year history of the college. We were 32 African Americans, and with me is Ronald Arnett Matchett in my class, who became Muhammad Abdullah, was also my brother in Alpha Phi Alpha, so, you know, maybe we'll be dealing with that, you know, certainly in the coming hours, you know, as we chat. 32 African Americans. Our late 60s generation had heroes. Can't name them all, of course. Some of them have become legendary, like the late Don Ogilvy, the late Armstead Robinson, and the late Glenn D. Shabir, known collectively to the Afro House today as ORD. And it's the only alumni group I've been donating to faithfully these years because it's so personally meaningful to me. Gone too soon. Prodded by those scholars, activists, Yale President Kingman Brewster committed himself to diversity and to the need for Black studies. In the spring of 1970, Brewster angered many white Yale alumni when he stated that Black revolutionaries likely could not receive a fair trial in the United States. I had a friend in Brooklyn, Eddie Rhodes, by the way, Monica, who called me and said, "Your president is something," who was a Black Panther, And he said he just really didn't expect that, but that's what Kingman Brewster said. And of course, to the need for Black studies. In the spring of 1970s, also, we were in, you know, flowing out of the 60s generation that was, I don't know, was thought of as a time of revolution in so many cultural, racial ways. Yale was on the front. In 1967, Yale chaplain William Sloan Coffin sent a letter to newspapers around the country, and it was headlined, "A Call to Resist Illegitimate Authority." What I'll do now for a couple of minutes here is read from edited sections of the preface to my book, which is titled Boss of Black Brooklyn, The Life and Times of Bertram L. Baker. So you see why I clapped so loudly when Brooklyn was mentioned.
Harlem.
Okay, well, Harlem too. It's the other side of Black New York, the other side but we've been in competition for the last 40 years, and that's another story. That's a whole nother story. And in fact, it's dealt with in this book. And my book, Boss of Black Brooklyn, is about Brooklyn's first Black elected official, who was my maternal grandfather. And the title of the preface is A Grandson Learns His Duty. Okay, here we go. Lucky I was that I didn't get blasted when Chris, in quotes, not his real name, shot off that rifle as he clumsily tried to clean it. Fortunate, too, that no one outside seemed to hear it. We were in the old Chapel Street building that housed the Black Student Alliance at Yale, or Afro House, as some began calling it. It was the spring of 1970, and Black Panther leader Bobby Seale was on trial. The city and campus were on edge. There were numerous guns in the house. Some of us thought it was possible local pigs, and I put that in quotes, and white motorcycle gangs would come after blacks in New Haven. I personally had a 12-gauge Mossberg shotgun. Little old me, people say, you know, that guy is just so shy, he's never gonna, you know. That for weeks I kept in my single room at Trumbull College.
Where's the executive committee when you need it?
Let me say this now. For those who are offended by my behavior in those days, I deeply apologize. Deeply apologize. By the grace of a higher power, I didn't get shot, arrested, or even threatened with expulsion from Yale after that episode. I was a 21-year-old Yale senior, several weeks away from graduation. The only thing missing was my senior essay in history, which I hadn't even begun to write.
Welcome to the club.
In the end, the ego-driven survivalist in me awoke. Over the coming weeks, with the help of amphetamines, this is, we're going to call this a confession of Ron Howell, class of '7. It was about black Caribbean immigrants in the United States in the early 1900s. My senior advisor was William S. McFeely, who would win a Pulitzer Prize for the biography of Ulysses S. Grant. McFeely remained a presence in my life over the coming decades. I visited him at his home upstate New York about 3 weeks before his death in 2019 to say goodbye and mostly thank you, because I owed him a lot, not just for that year, the thesis, but he was just always responsive to me and willing to share with me over time. But please also note that in the weeks after my 1970 graduation, my grandfather had gotten an inkling of my May Day activities. And he kicked me out of his brownstone home, the home in which I was raised and to which I had returned after graduation. Blessedly, in the coming years, our love returned, and in 2018, 37 years after his death, my biography of his drama-filled life, Boss of Black Brooklyn, was published. And I hope he's pleased, but he does know me at times. The Afro House of today, with its amazing diversity regarding gender and nationalities, gives me hope. It was meaningful for me to see a 2015 documentary a few weeks ago, via advice from my brother Mohammed Abdullah, by the way, that was titled Black in Cuba and featured black Yaleys, so many of them women. It was produced by Robin J. Hayes, a filmmaker who received her doctorate from Yale in African American Studies and Political Science, and haven't met her, but did some researching in the past couple of days on her. And I just feel I owe her, even though she's so much younger. You know? Cuba and what it represents, you know, to black people, you know. In the late 1980s, I made my first of many, many trips to Cuba for newspapers. And at that time, I spent a week there traveling around the capital city, interviewing Assata Shakur. I assume most of you know, used to be Joanne Chesimard, right? She had been a leader in the Black Liberation Army in the 1960s, our time generation, and was living in Cuba under a grant of political asylum. That's what Cuba was. After my front page Newsday profile of her ran, and this is maybe important to say, but it had not been reported before that she was in Cuba. People wondered where she was because she had escaped from prison. Wanted in connection to the killing of a police officer, a killing that she denies being involved with. It denied to me, and I reported that she denied it. So after my front page Newsday profile of her ran, I received calls from some of her associates in the United States. They said, with strong evidence, that the Reverend Al Sharpton had been working with the FBI in the early 80s trying to locate Shakur. That sits at the foundation of my just published book, I should say, King Al, How Sharpton Took the Throne. It's a complicated, but I like to think, and some have told me, a gripping story that I think Black Yaleys will find interesting. I believe it shows light and truth, right? Luxi Veritas. And it says a lot about our history that was lived out by us in the 1960s and is being lived out now. And so I say peace and love to all. La lucha continua. The struggle continues. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Should I just dive in? Hi. Wow.